So before I get started, I want to say three things. First of all, you guys hosed me by not only giving me a talk right before the cadaver, but I have to follow Michael Wang. Like, what are we doing here? The second thing is that this is right before as the last didactic before the cadaver. I want to thank Christoph, thank Saqib, thank John for putting a great course together. Right. Right. It's super hard to get all these organized. Obviously, it's at SSF, right? So thanks, Linda and Jens and Rod, for sort of giving us this platform to sort of share about, what we're excited about. So now that we've jam-packed this endoscopic curriculum for the last, couple days into all your brains, what's next? And it's going to be very different from Mike's talk. It's going to be like super high level, like summary, philosophical, like just high level topics on what you need to pay attention to when you need to start an endoscopic program. So as an endoscopic surgeon, you're going to get doubted. You're going to get questioned. You're going to get challenged. And it's your job to sort of like carry that flag and start proving things to people so you could have that program started successfully, right? And that's not to say that everyone else is doing the wrong thing, right? Just because you feel like this is the better way and this is the right way to do it, because other folks are already doing something else that they believe in, you have to start getting the data together and sort of take this energy that you've learned from this course to build your own programs. And that's going to be scary, right? Because having these conversations with some of these people are going to be tough, right? When I was trying to get an endoscopic tower to one hospital, a major stakeholder says, this is just some fancy camera to do a discectomy. We've seen this before, right? It's the same outcomes. It's too expensive. We don't need it. Been there, done that, just a phase. I would argue if they're saying we don't like you, you have other things to solve. These people they're well-meaning. But you have to educate them, right? And you have to take some data towards that conversation. And even now, you're going to have these conversations. But this is why these sort of courses are important, right? Because we are doing that. Talk to the endoscopic research group, all the guys here, all the expert faculty talking at this conference, and we're collecting prospective data. We're continually asking all the important questions and trying to solve those questions. So. That hopefully can set a better roadmap and pave the way for you to have those conversations a little easier. But you're going to feel alone. You're going to feel really alone when you're going to start building these programs. So, it's not going to feel good to be met with all this resistance. So, most of these guys here, chief residents and fellows and early attendings and obviously attendings after that. But you'll have to sort of figure out a game plan. You have to be purposeful about how you're going to start these programs. You have to be purposeful about what you follow. But remember, try to keep up with the mission and double click on your why and really sort of catch the bug, because it's a real thing. And most of the stuff you do in these conversations, how you're going to do it, you're going to have to rally, right? You're going to have to rally with everything you do. Whether you're talking about yourself and the things that you want to do and the things that you're doing, whether you're going to courses and training, whether you are trying to create this business plan for your practice, whether you're talking to your patients, right? They're going to be your biggest advocates. And insurance companies, it's annoying, it's a necessary evil, but that's also a rallying conversation, right? You have to rally all these people behind you. So, we're not going to solve all these problems, but just to give a high-level sort of overview on sort of how you're gonna develop this program. So first, you'll talk, right? Start talking, get people excited. People have to sort of follow you along this mission. And again, bring home some of this excitement. Leverage local conferences, join local committees, talk to significant stakeholders. Learn who the key players are in your institution, because they're gonna have to speak on your behalf. Folks in academic institutions or corporate sort of facilities, these ops managers, they're your friends, right? If they believe what you're doing, they're gonna sort of also rally behind you. Involve other disciplines, right? Here's a 3D print of a complex case we did, which involved our 3D printing lab, right, our radiology department. So now all of a sudden we have instant buy-in from radiology and other departments that are helping us in this sort of cause together. So rally, right? And you have to back it up. Keep going to courses like this. Keep getting your hands on cadavers. You know, you have to learn how to get better, faster, safer. We're talking about all this awake spine surgery and all these crazy cases and anesthesia doing all these favors for you. But you, like Mo talks about all the time, you have to prove to them that you can do these cases in a reasonable amount of time. People have to see these patients going home in 2 hours. So they see all that. People in your operating room are learning with you. So if you don't look like you know what you're doing, you're not going to make that next step, and you're not going to have, again, those people rally behind you. So, you know, everyone asks, how many cases do I need to do the next case and be comfortable with this? These are general numbers, but, you know, 10 cases gets your, you know, ergonomics a little bit better, how your shoulders hang, where your elbows are, where the bed is, and how it's all positioned. 50+ lumbar cases, then you start moving on to over-the-top decompressions, more aggressive bony drilling and ligamentum flavor removing, maybe, you know, using the osteotome a little bit. But after that, you move on to the cervical and thoracic cases, and the world is yours, right? You start doing these discitis cases, synovial cyst cases, you're fixing spontaneous CSF leaks, you're doing tumors, and so on and so forth. So then you look at the boring business side of it, right? If you have a super, strong business mind, like some of the guys here, Mike, Mark, all these guys, or if you don't, you just get a friend, right? Someone who you can learn. Same guys, right? If you're not the guy, talk to Mike and Mark and all these people, right? So you have to learn how to read these pro formas, what your capital expenditures are, what your operational budget is, right? Does your institution review them quarterly? Do they do it annually? These are conversations you have to get started early. And they're not going to be in sequence of your clinical endeavors. They're all going to happen in parallel. You have to get all these conversations early. So get that started now if you want to build a program you don't have that. Now, clinical practice, you know, if we had to pick one that's probably the most important, it's going to be this, right? Because this is what we're all doing this for, right? The patients have to trust you and then believe you, right? So when you sit down and have a conversation with them, you're going to have to tell them and be honest, which is all true. You know, this is one of my early cases, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to try to do this with a smaller incision. We're going to hopefully give you less narcotics, and this is going to try to, you know, achieve what a conventional procedure would have done anyway. And if I fail, you have to figure out what that failing is, right? You're not going to stop if you make them paralyzed. You're going to stop if you're uncomfortable, if you think the next step is dangerous, if you know that there's extra disc left, but that next move is going to be dangerous. That's when you stop before you have some irreversible injury, right? So if that's the definition of failure, then you could either come back and try again, or you can give them the conventional procedure that they would have gotten anyway. So it's all about how you talk to the patient and how you inform them in your decision making. This is just an extraforaminal cyst, L5S1, so pretty challenging to dock in this area, but you have the patient discussion, you say, hey, this is this thing here. I know the outside surgeon offered you a L4 to S1 ALIF, but this is probably causing your unilateral radiculopathy, so we can get to it and remove that. Insurance, you'll get real familiar with your peers, right? Because the denials are almost instant, right? You're gonna have these conversations with them. And the more you talk to them, the more familiar you're gonna get, but you can either let that upset you after you get denial after denial, or you can rally them too, right? There's a few times where I talk to the same person about different patients, right? They're like, oh yeah, you know, and then they start asking themselves what, you know, they would get. And that's a real sort of change I see in the conversations I'm having the more I have those conversations. But it's gonna be different, but I think, you know, instead of getting upset at it, you can really just game that conversation as well. So your network is super important, right? You should recognize that there's groups of people who've already done this, like all the people here. Keep going to courses and talk to people, get their numbers, because having a network is probably one of the most invaluable things that you could have. So to have these folks to call in complex cases or to discuss how they would approach it, or if it would be reasonable with an endoscopic approach. Like we have chats going on over and over and over about these complex cases, and take advantage of being here. Connect with us through the International Spinal Endoscopy Research Foundation, or find us through ESRG. We can connect you with and empower you with some mobile applications to follow clinical outcomes in your patients, like Spine Healthy, or other apps that help you get closer with your patients and continue the engagement. So this is how your practice can evolve, right? Your patient population will get younger, your surgeries will be outpatient, regular spine cases will get a little bit more interesting, right? You look at MRIs a little bit differently. You're asking yourself if you can take care of the pathology with an endoscope. The answer may not always be yes, but you'll consider it, right? So your cases may actually get a little bit more complex because people don't want to treat those complex pathologies with open approaches. They want to ask you if you can take care of it with an endoscope. And that's going to be from your partners. That's also going to be from your competitors. So your competitors turn into your colleagues. And to carry that flag up the pole a little bit more, they'll ask you when they have their own issues, and they'll send you their own MRIs of their cervical disc and their lumbar disc and ask you if you can take that out with an endoscope, which is really telling, right? Because if that's what they would want for themselves, this really tells you that you're doing something special. So you'll have to challenge yourself, and with each case you'll learn, and it really gets exciting, especially when you're waiting for endoscopic equipment, and let's say you don't have it yet. Patients will come to you and they'll tell you that they'll wait until you get the equipment because they wouldn't get a surgery unless you had the scope. So these are real conversations that happen, and that's what makes you keep coming back, right? So these are just like a few examples of some texts in the last few weeks, right? Some guy sending me a thoracic disc, and this guy sent me his own cervical spine MRI. Another one's asking if you could do a transforaminal for a slip. These are, this big caudally migrated fragment. We drilled a little pedicle off. This is a big calcified thoracic disc that we took out with the scope. This is a lumbar cyst. This is 2-level dorsal cervical decompression. This was actually a little bit interesting case. This was a trauma with a superior articulating process fracture that was causing radiculopathy. We fixed it from the front with just a 1-level ALIF, and then we went in the back and took that fragment out and decompressed that nerve. So to help with tricep weakness and radiculopathy. So it was an interesting application. So you can get really creative in how you use some of these tools. So just start running. Everything about the endoscope is rallying people for your cause. I mean, we heard what Dr. Young had to do, right? I mean, there's always going to be doubters, and right now it's maybe not to the same level, right? But it's this conversation still happen. They're hard conversations. Engage all these guys to help you with that. But with that, get to the lab. Good luck. Be purposeful over the cadavers, right? Get down there. Make sure, okay, if this is a real case, what would I do? Don't just get down there and start drilling, because a real case is very different from a cadaver. You can't practice how to control bleeding. Everyone wants to, target the thoracic spine in a cadaver, but the reason the thoracic case is hard is not because it's hard to dock there. It's hard because you're thinking about the level. It's hard because you're thinking about the lung and in the thoracic cavity. It's hard because you don't know if your angle is going to get you to the right pathology. Those are the reasons it's hard. So in a cadaver, it's going to be easy, and it's going to be less bone drilling. It's going to be easy. So make sure you're thinking when you're targeting on a cadaver or doing endoscopic practice on a cadaver that you're making believe that it's a real patient, because that really changes how you practice. But with that, I'll just end.
Thank you, Sanjay. And for the audience, I think it's really important that you give your guys self some grace. You're not going to learn how to be an endoscopic spine surgeon today. So that's okay, though. But you're here to absorb as much as you can and make sure you take whatever you can from the lab and then be persistent, right? None of us learned the first time we held the scope. It just takes the decision and the mind to say, okay, I want to do this and make this part of my practice, and then it will just happen. It's like, you know what, all the woo-woo people in California say, you got to manifest it. So manifest being an endoscopic spine surgeon.
All right, so we'll have a second session in the lab, and this is going to be focusing on interbody fusions.